Hello, my name is Charlotte and I am 25. When I say it out loud, I hear the youth in those numbers, but I feel older, as if I've lived several different lives back to back in these years. I'm a web designer. I work remotely. All I need is a stable internet connection and some light from the screen. I could be anywhere, but I ended up right here. I have an older sister, Amelia. She's 30. She always did everything right. Career moves, family, even her divorce happened at the right time, without scandals, almost aesthetically. She has a daughter, Evelyn, an 8-year-old copy of Amelia herself. The curls, the direct gaze, the slight haughtiness inherited from her mother. Amelia was always our parents' favorite. It was like that from the very beginning, and over time it became something of a natural law requiring no proof. 2 years ago, I moved to a house outside the city, old, creaky, with peeling paint on the shutters. Our parents' house, forgotten by everyone except the wind and the cobwebs. I didn't move there out of some romantic impulse or in search of solitude. I just needed a place to live, and I had almost no money left. Treatment, bills, loans. It all came crashing down on me at once, like an autumn storm on a flimsy awning. My credit history turned to ash, and with it, many of my dreams burned up. The doctors said I needed more air, more quiet, more walks, that I wouldn't recover in the city noise, but out there, beyond the city limits. Maybe. The country house seemed like a compromise between disaster and salvation. When I moved in, the house was in a pitiful state. It seemed the walls remembered only the echo of voices long since fallen silent. The floors sagged, the windows rattled with every gust of wind, the roof leaked like an old vessel with a crack. The electrical wiring resembled a web spun in the dark by a madman. I walked through the rooms and felt like I was talking to someone sick, someone who could still be helped if I were patient. I spent months putting everything in order. I worked during the day, designed website layouts at night, and in the morning I went to see electricians and handymen, haggling over every little thing. New wiring, leveled floors, new windows, a reinforced roof, even a drainage pump. Everything was paid for by me down to the last cent. I didn't ask for help. I needed to prove, first and foremost to myself, that I was still capable of building something, even if it was a house that didn't belong to me. My parents charged me $1,000 a month. "It's only fair," Mom said. "You're living in their property." I agreed. It was still cheaper than any apartment in the city, and the doctors would be pleased. After all, I thought the house was temporarily mine, until I recovered from my illness, until I could stand tall again. At the end of that summer, when the apples were ripening and the air smelled of dry leaves, we had a family dinner. Everything looked as usual: the long table, candles, Amelia's laughter, the clinking of dishes. I listened without participating, until Amelia uttered a phrase that made the room turn cold. You know, that country house would be perfect for me and Evelyn, our first real home. Mom smiled, that soft, warm smile I remember from childhood, but which was never meant for me. "That's a wonderful idea," she said. Amelia, straightening up, added, "I just turned 31. It's time to get my own place. Evelyn needs stability." Dad nodded. "It would be good for you to settle in your own house." I sat across from them, watching as their words formed a closed circle with no entry for me. No one looked my way, as if I were a shadow on the wall, as if no one remembered that I live in this house, that I breathe its air, pay its bills, patch its cracks. I felt their words turning into an intent, unspoken but already decided. They were going to give the house to Amelia and ask me to leave. A few days later, Mom called. Her voice was even, almost businesslike. "Charlotte, can we meet tomorrow at Starbucks? I need to discuss something." I agreed, although I already knew what it was about. The next day, I came. Mom was sitting by the window, in front of her a neat folder, thick, as if it contained not just paper, but a whole story in which I no longer had a place. I sat down opposite her. "What is it?" I asked, even though the question was just a formality. She opened the folder, neat printouts, a property appraisal, a site plan, a draft lease agreement. My name on the agreement was crossed out, thinly, evenly, as if they were erasing a mistake, not a person. Amelia has saved up for a down payment. She wants to buy the house, Mom said calmly. I looked at the papers for a long time. I live there, I finally said. We're giving you 90 days to move out. I can't leave, I said. The doctor said I need to live where there's fresh air, to take walks. It's part of my treatment. Mom closed the folder as if putting a final point. You can rent another house. We don't have to sacrifice Amelia's future for you. Sacrifice? I repeated. I've been paying rent for 2 years. I repaired everything with my own money. She sighed. That was your choice. No one asked you to do it. I stood up. The coffee on the table was almost untouched, and the steam above it had already vanished. When I stepped outside, the air felt thick and cold. A week later, a registered letter arrived. A thick envelope with an official seal that hit me like a cold key against glass. Inside was an eviction notice. My parents were the plaintiffs, and I, designated by a line on the curved page, the defendant. The lawsuit was formulated dryly and mercilessly. My residence was described as permitted, the term of which had allegedly expired. I was unlawfully occupying the premises, interfering with their daughter's plans and hindering her lawful expectations of acquiring her first home. The wording was as level as a verdict, and there was not a drop of pain in it, only calculation and the law as a shield. I immediately called my father. My heart was beating like a drum in my chest. Dad, are you suing me? His voice was cold and quiet, as if he were stating a decision for strangers' ears. Charlotte, it's nothing personal. The time has simply come, he replied evenly. Amelia needs stability for Evelyn. I tried to explain that I needed stability too. The doctors had prescribed fresh air and walks as part of my treatment, that the house was part of my recovery program. His response was final. Amelia needs it more than you do. And the receiver settled into a garden of silence, leaving me with a ringing in my ears. I sat in the living room among the things I had acquired with my own hands and money and began gathering evidence, like a builder gathering planks for a new staircase. The new windows I had ordered and paid for, the leveled floors I had paid craftsmen to fix, the electrical panel I had redone and had certified by an electrician, all of it could now become witnesses. I photographed the seams and joints, took pictures of receipts and invoices, printed out bank statements where every transferred $1,000 was listed as rent for country house. I found an old letter from my mom where she thanked me for paying the property taxes on the house, a letter that now seemed like a voice from another time. I compiled a folder with copies, a list of works, wiring replacement, leaking roof repair, drainage pump restoration, window installation, floor leveling, a list like a catalog of wounds healed by the efforts of my hands. Relatives began to get drawn into this game. Aunts and uncles, like external directors, sent me messages where family happiness was presented as an absolute value, justifying any reshuffling of people on the map of family relations. Family is everything, Charlotte, they said, and their voices carried a demand. Yield, because it's the right thing to do. Amelia deserves a chance, they repeated, and in those simple words, the years I had invested were lost, along with the nights after surgeries when I gathered my strength bit by bit. Only my grandmother called differently. Her voice was fragile and unyielding at the same time. I'm on your side. Don't let them push you around. That word from my grandmother sounded like a steel nail of hope driven into the soft wood of despair. Mom and Dad stopped coming. Their visits dried up. Instead, Amelia started appearing more often. She walked around the property, imagining where she would hang shelves, which walls she would paint, where she would set up a room for Evelyn. Her conversations were about shelves and colors, as if she were already managing the space, not acknowledging my ongoing life within it. I said, I'm still here. But she spoke as if simultaneously to you and about you, without making eye contact. Her footsteps in the kitchen sounded alien, her plans, like shadows on my windows. When the court date arrived, I entered the hall with papers in my hands and my heart in my throat. They were sitting there, my parents, Amelia, little Evelyn beside them, her smile seeming rehearsed and foreign. Their lawyer stood up first, a middle-aged man in an expensive, roomy, and pointedly neat suit. His movements were precise, his voice even and polished, like that of a man accustomed to turning family relations into legal categories. He spoke, building his arguments into a coherent chain. My clients generously allowed their daughter to temporarily reside in their property. This arrangement was always intended as temporary. The permission has been revoked. The owners have the right to peaceful and free disposal of their real estate. The defendant refuses to voluntarily vacate the premises and thereby hinders the lawful transfer of ownership to Amelia, who has saved up the funds and is ready to become its full owner. Then my lawyer stood up. Sarah, petite, with sharp cheekbones and a direct gaze that seemed capable of washing away any lie. She was a woman without frills, sharp, precise, almost steely. When she spoke, the hall seemed to freeze. Your Honor, I would like to present the evidence. Her voice was even, confident without strain, but with a tension you feel when someone stands on the side of truth and knows it. She opened a thick folder and began laying out documents one after another, like cards in a game where the stakes weren't money, but a life. Utility bills in my client's name, property tax payments paid by her personally, bank statements confirming monthly transfers of $1,000 marked rent for country house. The judge nodded, accepting the documents, and Sarah was already producing new papers. Photographs of the repairs my client made at her own expense. Here is a list of the work and order confirmations. Then she raised her eyes. My client is not a temporary resident. She has been a tenant in good faith for 2 years. Moreover, she has significantly improved the property with her own labor and funds. Here are the repair permits, which the plaintiffs personally signed for Charlotte Thompson. Sarah unfolded several sheets. In the upper right corner was my father's signature. I saw him lower his eyes as if reading his own name for the first time. Also attached are medical documents confirming that my client is advised to reside in a rural area due to her health condition and recovery process, Sarah continued. She handed the judge a thin folder with medical reports. For a few moments, a tense silence hung in the room. You could hear pages turning. My parents' lawyer fidgeted, as if his suit had suddenly become too tight. He looked confused, as if he had come for a minor dispute and found himself on a battlefield. The judge listened attentively and, raising her eyes, asked if anyone wished to add anything. And then Amelia stood up. Her voice sounded soft, almost plaintive, but it carried the confidence of someone accustomed to the world bending to her logic. Your Honor, I'm not trying to be the villain, she said, clasping her hands. I just want to give my daughter a safe home. I saved up. I worked. I deserve this. I'm not asking for anything unfair, just the opportunity to live with my parents and pay rent until I can buy the house. Her face was impeccably calm, even smug. She sat down, giving a slight nod, like an actress after a well-played scene. And suddenly, Evelyn stood up. Small with a serious face, composed beyond her years. Your Honor, she said in a thin voice, can I show you something? No one knows about this. The judge raised an eyebrow in surprise. Please show me. The girl approached her, holding her iPad like a precious relic. I recorded this in my mom's Ring camera app. She doesn't know I did it. The judge took the device, pressed the screen. The sound came on, and the courtroom seemed to stop breathing. On the video, I saw Amelia and my mom entering my house. In the corner of the frame was a date, 3 weeks ago. That day, I was indeed at my grandmother's. The camera recorded Amelia approaching the fireplace, crouching down, doing something with the grate and the flue. Her voice was clear. There. Now the carbon monoxide won't vent outside. It will build up in the room. Then my mother's voice. Quiet, with the tone she used to ask if I was cold as a child. Will she die from this? Amelia shrugged. We'll see. When it gets cold, she'll light the fireplace. What will be, will be. No one will suspect anything. And then, from the edge, As if from another world, a child's voice. "Mommy, what did you and Grandma do?" A pause. "Nothing, sweetie. Just a surprise for Aunt Charlotte. Don't tell anyone." "Okay." The screen went black. Silence fell heavily, like a stone into water. The air became viscous. I looked at the judge but didn't see her. Only a blur of light. My shoulders shook. My breath became ragged. My mother and sister had tried to kill me. That sentence didn't fit in my mind, as if my brain refused to accept it as truth. The judge handed the tablet back to the girl and looked at my mother and Amelia. Their faces were chalk white, their eyes glassy. The judge spoke slowly, distinctly, each word cutting the air. "This hearing is immediately suspended. I am summoning emergency services to inspect the fireplace and carbon monoxide ventilation system. If the facts are confirmed, serious criminal charges will be brought against you." Then the judge turned to me. "Miss Thompson, I strongly advise you not to return to that house until the inspection is complete." I just nodded, unable to utter a word. Everything inside me was ringing, as if I were standing under a bell. The hearing is adjourned, pending official results. When the session closed, people began to rise, the rustle of papers and footsteps sounding like a distant surf. I remained standing, feeling the floor sway beneath my feet. Everything I knew about my family had just crumbled. Mom and Amelia, two figures who had been the center of the household my whole life, now stood beyond the pale of humanity. Evelyn came up to me. She looked up, with the same eyes as Amelia's, only honest. "I'm sorry, Aunt Charlotte. I knew they did something bad. That's why I recorded it." I hugged her, feeling her thin, trembling shoulders under my fingers. "You saved my life," I said. My voice sounded hoarse, as if I were speaking from inside a fog. That evening, I didn't go home. I rented a room in a hotel on the outskirts with windows facing the highway where trucks rumbled. My laptop was nearby, but I couldn't work. My thoughts kept returning to the video, to my mother's words spoken without emotion. Will she die from this? And to Amelia's cold indifference. The room smelled of coffee and detergent, but I felt like I could still smell smoke. 3 days after that court session, where the truth exploded like a hot coal in the fireplace, the police called me. The voice on the other end was dry and official, without a trace of emotion. But every word cut the air. "Miss Thompson, we have completed the inspection of your fireplace. The examination confirmed. Someone intentionally tampered with the carbon monoxide ventilation system. This created a direct threat to your life. We are initiating a criminal case against your mother and sister. We have sufficient evidence, including the video. We will contact you for subsequent procedures." I sat there clutching the phone, feeling the words sear into me, leaving a burn. They were now the accused, my family, the ones who gave me life. A minute after the call, my phone vibrated again. First, Mom, then Amelia, then Dad. Messages poured in one after another, like hail you can't hide from. "Charlotte, please, we need to talk. We didn't want things to go this far. We're so sorry. Help us with the police." The voices on the recordings sounded soft, as if they still hoped for the old magic of kinship, capable of erasing any deed. I didn't answer. Not the calls, not the texts. I silenced every signal, like a person yanking a wire from the wall to avoid hearing ghosts. I deleted the messages without reading them. No sense of guilt came, only a steady, cold calm. A week later, the court reconvened. When I entered the hall, my heart beat slowly, as if it knew what lay ahead wasn't a battle, but an epilogue. Mom and Amelia sat side by side, both pale with extinguished eyes. Dad next to them, hunched, aged 10 years. I barely recognized him. The man who used to stand straight and speak confidently now looked broken. The judge entered, and the hall instantly fell silent. Her voice was firm, without a shadow of doubt. Before proceeding with the eviction matter, it is necessary to note the results of the investigation. The respondents in this case, Karen and Amelia Thompson, intentionally tampered with the fireplace system in the specified property. Their actions created a threat to the life of the plaintiff, Charlotte Thompson. The police have officially initiated a criminal case." Mom sobbed, covering her face with her hands. Amelia lowered her head, and her shoulders trembled. Dad stared at the floor. The judge continued. "Regarding the eviction case, after reviewing all presented evidence, I dismiss the lawsuit with prejudice. This means it cannot be refiled. Furthermore, I issue a restraining order. Karen, Robert, and Amelia Thompson are prohibited from approaching the property without the plaintiff's written permission." She shifted her gaze to me, direct, calm, human. "Miss Thompson, I strongly recommend you change the locks immediately. The hearing is closed." When she struck the gavel, silence settled in the room. My parents and Amelia rose almost simultaneously and left without looking in my direction. Their backs disappeared through the door, and the air seemed to grow lighter. In the following days, I received dozens of new messages, now of a different, repentant kind. Relatives, the very ones who had previously urged me to be understanding, now wrote with confused apologies. "We didn't know. What your mother and sister did is terrible. Forgive us for pressuring you. We understand if you don't want to communicate." I replied to a few, those whose words sounded genuine. To the rest, I left silence. I had no more strength to explain who was right and who was wrong. The next day, I called a locksmith. A man with a kind face and the smell of metal arrived around lunchtime. He worked on the doors for a long time, changing the cylinders, checking the hinges. When he finished, I asked if anything else was needed. He shook his head. "No one will get in without your knowledge now." I paid him, and as he left, I felt not relief, but emptiness, as if, along with the locks, I had sealed the last crack through which my old life could return. The next morning, I invited a specialist to check and repair the fireplace. He arrived in work overalls with tools, and after disassembling part of the system, he was silent for a long time. Then he straightened up and said, "Someone seriously damaged the ventilation. You're lucky you didn't use the fireplace. You wouldn't have woken up." He didn't know who he was talking to. I just nodded. When he left, the house became quiet for the first time in a long while. Safe. Several weeks had passed. I worked, slept, ate, but a low, humming current of anxiety still buzzed inside me. The day the detective called, I was just trying to finish a layout for a client. His voice was even, but slightly softer than before. "Miss Thompson, I wanted to let you know. Your mother and sister have confessed. They confirmed they intentionally tampered with the fireplace." I listened, holding my breath. What happens now? The case has been forwarded to the prosecutor. They have been charged with attempted bodily harm and creating a threat to life. You will need to give a statement. I understand. He was silent for a moment. They claimed they meant you no harm, said they only wanted to scare you to make you leave. A short, hoarse laugh escaped me. Scare me? With carbon monoxide? That's their explanation. The prosecutor is inclined to disbelieve it. 2 months later, the criminal trial began. I was sitting in the courtroom again, but the atmosphere was different now. Not a dispute about a house, but a clash of morality and law. Mom and Amelia looked like people hollowed out from within. They cried. A lot, sincerely, but it was too late. On the stand, Amelia said, "We didn't want her to die. We just wanted her to move out. We thought if she felt a little unwell, she'd get scared and leave." Mom repeated almost the same words, trembling. "We made a terrible mistake. We weren't thinking clearly. We would never have wished for Charlotte's death." The prosecutor asked them a question in a cold, emotionless voice that made the very air in the room feel denser. "Miss Thompson, did you research information about carbon monoxide poisoning before interfering with the fireplace system?" Amelia averted her eyes as if hoping the question would dissolve on its own. "I looked up some things online," she finally uttered. "So you knew carbon monoxide posed a danger?" "I knew it could cause discomfort." "Discomfort?" The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "Did you know it could kill a person?" Silence. The courtroom seemed frozen in anticipation of this admission. Only the tapping of the court clerk's keys and the soft rustle of papers broke the stillness. "Miss Thompson, answer the question." Amelia slowly raised her head. Her lips trembled. Yes, I knew. The words swept through the room like a cold wind. Mom sat beside her, pale-eyed and red-eyed, and for the first time made no attempt to justify herself. The judge looked at them both calmly, almost wearily. The world seemed to have shrunk to a few square meters between the prosecution's table and the defendant's dock. In the end, they both pleaded guilty. No grand speeches, no excuses, just a quiet, almost relieved admission. The judge announced the sentence: probation, no jail time, but with a probation period and mandatory compensation, $100,000 for moral damages to be paid to me. I sat, listened, and couldn't quite comprehend the figure. 100,000, not a punishment, not redemption, just a number, a dry measure of human guilt. After the hearing, Sarah called. Her voice, usually quick and confident, was softer now. "Charlotte, we need to meet with your parents, your sister, and their lawyer. We need to settle the property issue." "Settle what? The eviction case is closed." "Yes, but now they owe you money, and you're living in their house. It's all connected. We can formalize this reasonably." The following Tuesday, I entered a conference room, a small space with a long table, smelling of coffee and paper. Beyond the glass wall, the city was visible, indifferent and bright. My parents were already there. Mom stooped, her face gaunt. Father, not lifting his eyes. Amelia, silent with dark circles under her eyes. The silence was so thick it seemed even the dust was holding its breath. Sarah spoke first. "We're here to discuss an agreement regarding the property. Karen and Amelia Thompson owe Charlotte $100,000. But as it turns out, they don't have that kind of money. However, the house where Charlotte resides is valued at approximately $80,000. My parents' lawyer nodded, like a man who already knew where this was headed. Sarah continued, "We propose the following. Karen and Michael transfer the deed to the house to Charlotte. In return, she pays them $80,000. This will cover the majority of the debt and officially secure the house for her." Mom spoke for the first time sharply, like a person poked in a wound. "Where would Charlotte get $80,000? Sarah didn't even blink. "That's not your concern. Do you accept the terms or not?" The silence lasted a long time. Father looked at the table, then at Mom. She looked at Amelia. Everyone understood there was no choice. "We accept," Father finally said. His voice was quiet, tired. Sarah pulled out a folder thick as a textbook and laid out the documents. Deed of transfer, notarial papers, signatures, stamps. Everything was legal, clean, final. The papers rustled like dry leaves, the sound of something big ending. They didn't know the money had come from my grandmother. A week earlier, I had gone to see her, told her about Sarah's proposal, and without a second thought, she opened an old shoebox containing bank documents. "Take it, dear. This is your inheritance in advance. You've earned your peace. The house should be yours." There was no pity in her voice, only a quiet strength belonging to those who have weathered many storms. We signed everything without unnecessary words. My name appeared in the lines where theirs used to be. The transfer of ownership was completed almost mundanely, as if it were a simple accounting operation, not a turning point in my entire life. When it was all over, Mom suddenly spoke. Her voice was brittle, like glass. "Charlotte, I know you don't want to listen, but I'm sorry. We never wanted to." I stood up. "Don't." I left the room without looking back. Sorry was too weak a word for what they had done. Sorry is for broken cups, for words spoken in anger, not for an attempt to kill. Amelia followed me out into the corridor. "Please wait. Can we talk? I made a terrible mistake, but we're still family." I stopped at the elevator. The silver doors reflected our faces, mine calm, hers bewildered. "No, Amelia, we are not family. Family doesn't do what you did." The doors closed and the sound of the elevator severed all the past like a knife. When I returned home, a new key was in the door. I turned it, entered, and for the first time felt that this was truly my home. Not a temporary shelter, not a rental, not an object of dispute. A home bought with the currency of pain, betrayal, and silence. The kitchen smelled of wood and paint. I walked through the rooms, touching the walls, and every brushstroke of renovation, every trace of my work resonated within me as something familiar, something mine. Now it belonged to me, completely, legally, indisputably. My parents could no longer take it back. Amelia had no claim. The house, once a symbol of struggle, had become a fortress, quiet, sturdy, mine. I continued to live as I had once dreamed before all this storm. My day started early. Fresh air outside the windows, morning coffee with a view of the garden, and long hours at my laptop, where I once again felt part of something big and alive. My work as a web designer gave me not just stability, it became a way to restore my trust in the world, in myself, in the simple, quiet things that can't be bought but can be rebuilt. The walks, once prescribed by the doctor as part of my treatment, had become a habit, almost a ritual. I walked along the narrow road where the morning fog hung low, as if the air itself was in no hurry. It smelled of pines and earth after the dew. My body was gradually returning to normal, my breath becoming even, my heart calmer. Sometimes I caught myself not expecting trouble around every corner, not listening for every creak of the floorboards. In the house where I used to fall asleep warily, there was now only silence, and that was the most precious music. Grandma called twice a week, without fail, as if on a schedule set by fate itself. We talked about the weather, books, her garden, and never about those whose names I no longer uttered. She understood without words. Sometimes I heard weariness in her voice, but with it, a steely inner core, the same one that sustained me. She was the only one who didn't judge, didn't distance herself, didn't try to reconcile the irreconcilable. Only her soft voice reminded me that kinship untainted by betrayal still existed in the world. Evelyn called too, not often, but with a sincere, childlike curiosity that I loved. She told me about school, about a friend learning to play the guitar, about a book where the heroine ran away from home and built a new life for herself. Sometimes I found myself listening to her laughter and feeling something tighten inside, not from pain, but from a strange, unfamiliar warmth. "Aunt Charlotte," she said one day, "I'm sorry for what Mom did." "It's not your fault, sweetheart. On the contrary, you saved me. If it weren't for your video, I might have used the fireplace." I knew they were doing something bad, I just didn't know how bad. "You're a good girl, Evelyn, a very good girl." She was silent for a second, then asked quietly, "Will you ever forgive Mom and Grandma?" "I don't know, maybe someday, but not now." "I understand," she replied, and her voice held so much maturity it scared me. 8 years old and already understanding that not everything in life can be fixed. My parents and Amelia kept trying to reach out. Emails, messages, long, convoluted, full of promises, regrets, quotes about family and forgiveness. It all seemed alien, artificial, like spam emails where emotions are sold in installments. I deleted them without reading. Let silence be the answer. The rumors, as always, did what they do best. Spread. Relatives knew. Neighbors knew. Amelia's colleagues knew. Even people from Mom's church knew, where for years she had played the role of the flawless woman with a radiant smile and impeccable manners. Now her smile was gone. I heard that after the trial she came to service, but people avoided her, some even crossing the street. Virtue, once tarnished, doesn't wash off. 6 months later, I suddenly realized I no longer woke up with a heaviness in my chest. The air was just air again, not a reminder of poison. My body grew stronger, my walk more confident. I was working hard again, sometimes even with excitement like before. New clients appeared, serious, substantial ones. The money came steadily. I managed to save a little, pay off old bills, repay my debt to Grandma, though she resisted. "You've already paid," she said, "by living." She visited once a month. Small but surprisingly energetic, she walked through the house, touching the walls as if testing their strength. "This place is wonderful, Charlotte. You've made it a real home." "Thank you, Grandma. I couldn't have done it without you." "Nonsense," she chuckled. "You did it all yourself. I just helped with a bit of money. The house is yours now, not just on paper, in essence. You've earned it twice over, with your hands and with your heart. We drank tea by the window. She talked about little things, new roses she'd planted, a neighbor who got a cat. We didn't mention my parents. She knew I wasn't ready. And that silence between us was the warmest of all conversations. Sometimes Evelyn visited. Amelia would drop her off at the gate and drive away without a word. My niece and I would spend the day as if nothing bad had ever happened. We baked cookies, painted rocks, had picnics in the backyard. "How is your mom?" I asked once. "Okay," she replied, shrugging. "She's working, but has fewer clients. She says it's her fault. Keeps telling me, choose right, otherwise mistakes will follow you your whole life." "She's right," I said quietly. "Do you hate her?" I was silent for a long time, listening to the wind rustling outside. "No, I don't hate her. I'm just done with her. It's not the same thing." Evelyn nodded. Understanding flickered in her eyes, too deep for her age. I blocked all their numbers, addresses, attempts to reach me. Sometimes snippets of news came through distant relatives. Father had taken early retirement, not by his own choice. The company didn't want a scandal. My mother barely left the house, lost her friends, and stopped going to church. Amelia worked, but she was barely keeping afloat. Her reputation in marketing had been ruined after the trial. No one wanted to get involved with a woman whose name was associated with poisoning and lies. They all paid for what they had done. I wasn't happy. I wasn't gloating. I simply noted to myself, the law of the universe had been restored. Everything has a price, and they had paid theirs. One day, in the middle of a warm, lazy day, when the sun was almost at its zenith and the soft light fell on the keys of my laptop, I heard a knock on the door. At first, I thought it was the postman or one of the neighbors, but when I went to the window and cautiously peered out, my heart sank. My father was standing at the gate. His figure seemed alien, almost a ghost, out of place in this reality I had finally constructed for myself. He stood awkwardly, like a man who had forgotten why he had come, his arms hanging at his sides, looking at the house as if trying to recognize it anew. He shouldn't have been here. The restraining order was still in effect, and his mere presence at my doorstep was already a violation of the boundaries I had worked so hard to build. The world inside the house seemed frozen. I picked up the phone, my fingers shaking not from fear but from an old ingrained fatigue. "There's a person at my door with a restraining order against them," I said into the phone. The operator's voice was calm and confident, matter of fact. "We'll send an officer immediately. Please remain inside and don't open the door." I put the phone down and took a step back, but my father knocked again. His voice, muffled and hoarse, came through the wood. "Charlotte, please. I just want to talk." I didn't answer. I stood there, looking out the window, watching him standing there, slightly hunched over, his tired face suddenly seeming strange and old, not at all like what I remembered from childhood. He didn't look dangerous, he looked broken. But pity, that was something I no longer had the right to. About 10 minutes later, dust rose on the road, and I saw a police car approaching. The officer got out, said something to my father, who nodded, muttered something in response, and without resisting, slowly walked to the side of the road. I watched him get into his old car, turn the key, and drive away without a backward glance. By the time the officer reached my door, I was breathing normally again. "Ms. Thompson, are you all right?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, thank you for coming." He glanced at his notepad. "Would you like to file a restraining order violation?" I thought for a moment, listening to the distant sound of his engine fade. "No," I said. "Just make sure he doesn't come back." After that incident, the silence stretched on for months. No letters, no calls, no attempts to show up at my house again. It seemed everyone had finally tired of this endless cycle of pain and guilt. My life settled into a stable routine. Work, walks, rare visits with my grandmother, calls to Evelyn. I regained a peace that allowed not only solitude, but also a silence that felt like comfort. I made new acquaintances through work, people who knew me only as a designer, not as the heroine of a huge family scandal. A few weeks later, I joined a local hiking group, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to simply laugh, talk about the weather, share weekend plans, without looking back. A year after the agreement was signed, I sat on the porch, the evening light slowly spreading across the wooden railing, and watched the sun sink behind the tree line. There was something final, almost ceremonial about that sunset, as if nature itself were summing up the past. I thought about everything: the attempted eviction, the ruined fireplace, the courtroom full of strangers, how my mother and Amelia chose each other, as always, leaving me on the periphery of their shared world. I thought about how they, without blinking, tried to take my house away. The house I restored with my own hands, staying up nights painting, laying tiles, fixing wiring, all so I could have a place where I could be myself. They were willing to risk my life to maintain the illusion of control for the sake of that very family justice that only they believed in. I remembered Evelyn, fragile but courageous, holding her phone when she showed that video in court, without which I might not be sitting here now. I remembered my grandmother, her determination and quiet generosity when she gave me money, not as a handout, but as an act of faith. This is your inheritance in advance, Charlotte. You deserve it. And I remembered those few relatives who found the courage to say, "I'm sorry," and not make excuses. I realized then, sitting on that very porch, that family isn't always those you share blood with. Sometimes true family is those who stick around when everyone else has turned their backs. My grandmother is family. Evelyn is family. The rest are just people I once knew but no longer have to love. I was 26. I owned my home by right, not just by the deeds, but by the effort I'd poured into every corner. My health was recovering, my breathing became freer, as if with each passing day I was breathing not just air, but also confidence. I had a job I loved, clients who appreciated me, friends who knew only my present, not my past. My parents and Amelia lost almost everything: their reputation, their friends, their public respect, everything they'd once been proud of. They had to pay $100,000 they didn't have and give up the house they'd wanted to keep in the family, all because they lacked one thing: to acknowledge that I have the right to live, breathe, and belong to myself. I was no longer angry. I didn't wish them harm or dream of retribution. I didn't wish them anything at all. They had become just strangers, their faces dissolved into the past, like old photographs that have lost their color. People I once knew who had made a terrible, irreversible choice. I walked into the house, turned on the light, put the kettle on, and started making dinner. Tomorrow morning I had a client call, then a hike with new friends along the trail everyone was talking about. Evelyn was supposed to be arriving this weekend. We were planning to plant a garden, choose flowers, and discuss the best place to put a bench. Life was once again filled with sounds, scents, and movement, but without fear. The country house stood strong, quietly breathing warmth, and I felt how the walls, windows, floor, every even joint and every light bulb seemed to confirm everything I fought for now truly belongs to me.